Welcome back to week 7 of the college football season. We are To The Point Sports Report. Last week I was joined just by Michael, but Marcus is back with us this week. Marcus, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks.
Good to be back.
It's good to have you back. Hey, Michael, thanks for joining me last week. You did a good job holding down the fort while it was just the two of us.
Absolutely, you and I.
Yeah, I'm really hard trying not to just start busting out singing just the two of us. Anyways, we didn't think it was going to be a great week of college football, but it seemed to be a pretty good week. Still a lot of good games, some overtime victories, and a little bit there that kind of has now shaken up the landscape of football. We're going to do a little bit different of a podcast this week. We're not going to talk quite as much about the games of the big marquee matchups, but we'll still talk about the games a bit, but we're going to kind of do more of a roundtable discussion, or as I said earlier, since there's only 3 of us, a tripod discussion. Sorry.
Oh, man.
Marcus is giving us looks over here. He told a joke earlier about not a 3-way, but I mean, might as well have been.
Yeah.
Whoa, don't throw me under the bus here.
You threw yourself under the bus. Okay, so we're going to jump straight into this. I hope you guys are going to enjoy this show. Maybe we'll tell you the joke later. No.
Probably not.
As let's start looking at...
our sponsors will get rid of us.
Let's see. Let's start straight into what team is maybe on the cusp of a top 4, but is going to be left out in your opinion?
Left out of the top 4? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they will not make the playoff.
Yeah, this is a hard one. I had that exact same question running through my head. There's 5 Power 5 conferences, so to speak, Power 5. That division seems to be a little bit weaker than it originally was. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. I'm not convinced by Clemson. Yeah, they're good. And I know they're in the top 4 right now, but I'm not super convinced by them. The people that are really convincing to me, or the teams, are Michigan and Washington. Those two, they still have a huge gauntlet to go through. Michigan has Ohio State, Michigan State, couple other solid teams. Washington still will have to face Washington State, which is very surprising to say that's going to be a tough game. But they're actually on a roll right now. So Washington still has a couple of rough games to get by, but they have the best chance of being the top team in the Pac-12. And so I think they're in the clear. Alabama, they still go through a lot of rough games. And if they can make it through them, yeah, by all means, put them number 1, let them play and see what they can do against the other conferences. But I find it a little hard to believe that they're going to go unscathed come the end of the year. Now, a 1-loss Alabama could also make it as long as they, win their conference, which is a question I have for you guys later. But, I really think Alabama plays Tennessee this week. I really think Tennessee's got a shot. And I know that's Michael's turf a little bit, so we might get into that a little bit later. What I've been saying essentially is it looks like the SEC is going to have a team. The Big Ten is probably going to have a team as long as, they don't kill each other getting to the conference championship. I think Washington's going to win the Pac-12, and they'll be in there. Clemson I'm not convinced of, but the only thing is there's no good Big 12 team. And so I think it defaults to a maybe slightly weaker Clemson instead of a Big 12.
Yeah, it's, the Big 12 is definitely going to get left out. And I'm going to go, I think this will be kind of a very interesting topic of discussion. I'm going to say that Louisville is the team that's going to be left out. And the reason why I say that is because there's been a lot of movement already amongst the top teams, either with upsets or just big games coming up, for example, Ohio State and Wisconsin. Marcus, I agree with you. I think Alabama, look, this is going to be a very interesting stretch for them. So they've got Tennessee this weekend at Tennessee, and they do play them tough. I'm not saying that they've won because they haven't, but Tennessee plays anybody extremely tough at home, and Texas A&M has a week to prepare for Alabama at College Station. So, we could be talking about Alabama as the team on the outside looking in, but overall, I agree with you. I think the Big 12 will be left out. It's just a matter of which one of these conference champions is going to end up making it. A sneaky thought. Ole Miss has an opportunity to win the SEC and still make the top four, if you think about it. Alabama will need to lose twice. I think that there are opportunities for them to lose. I'm not saying it'll happen, but might be a sneaky team that might make its way in.
As you brought up, Alabama has probably the driver's seat, but I mean, so does A&M. We're looking at two undefeated teams that have yet to play each other. If the undefeated team comes out of the SEC, they're obviously in. Michigan and Ohio State, the winner of that is most likely in. Clemson has they're in a driver's seat. They can easily make it. Washington is a kind of a team a little bit in question for me. It's the teams outside of that already have a loss. But as I look at Nebraska, they have all the opportunities to get there. My question comes to Baylor. If Baylor goes undefeated and say you have a one-loss champion out of either the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, or even now the Pac-12, does an undefeated Big 12 winner get in? And if so, is it over all of them or just a couple of those conferences?
They don't officially have a conference championship game, do they? That's starting in the next season or so. But I do think that they came up with an idea to actually crown a champion, even if there's a one loss, which that was a big issue in the first playoff.
It's called head-to-head.
Right, which makes so much sense, but, apparently not to them. But then again, they're also looking at some crap schools to get into their conference. That's besides the point. I think because they don't have a conference championship game, I think that will hurt them. If the other four conferences have a one-loss team each, it's hard to say that Baylor shouldn't be in, but at the same time, do they really deserve to be in because they didn't play the other best team in the conference, theoretically the other best team. But, undefeated Power 5, by definition, I think should be in, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm going to take it a different route. Look, the selection committee has told teams that they need to challenge themselves. Their non-conference schedule was atrocious this year.
That's true.
We said it early on in the year when we did our first podcast. Look, a lot of these teams that were playing up, higher ranked opponents, they had an opportunity to move up. And I think for some of those top teams, even if they lost, it was almost a mulligan, to be honest. A lot of those games were non-conference, so there's going to be emphasis on conference champions. But I think the committee will probably leave Baylor out, even if they do go undefeated. And I probably wouldn't put them in there anyway. I haven't seen enough tape on them, but they just didn't challenge themselves. And the committee said that they would, reward teams that went out and, put themselves on the line.
I saw a stat, a graphic that showed certain teams that have made the college football playoff and where they started at this time of the year, and most of them were not in the top four, as low as 18. As I see these teams that are sitting back there, I mean, you do have Nebraska at 5-0 and Baylor at 5-0, both at 10 and 11 respectively. But you have one-loss teams back. I just look at the top six. Two of them come from the same conference, so Ohio State and Michigan will knock each other out, allowing Washington to move up. And number 1 is Alabama. Number 6 is Texas A&M. The winner of that game will move up. You have all of the things in place for the top 4 teams to stay undefeated, to win and get into the playoff. But my question comes, is there a one-loss team back there? And if so, who? And then the other question is talking about if they all beat up on each other, the team sitting number 15 is Boise State. Everyone was talking about Houston. Is Boise State sitting in a spot that's good enough at this point in the season to propel up the rankings when all these teams continue to beat up on each other? There's only 5 games in. I mean, we're 5-6 games in. We're talking another 8 or so games, 7-8 games for some of them. If they all beat each other up, does Boise State propel? And if so, can they make a top 4 if everyone has 1, 2, 3 losses?
Here's my thought on that. I think even if Houston went undefeated, it would be hard to get them in the Final Four, mainly because there's 5 power conferences and that would leave 2 out. And that just, I don't like the whole Power 5, Group of 5 division, but they're there for a reason, and Power 5 conferences are the stronger conferences. I can't deny that. And so to leave two of those out for a Group of 5, who probably will be a Power 5 when the Big 12 expands, I think that's just too hard. And so if Houston was going to get left out, I think Boise State will definitely get left out. The only way I think they have a shot is if Washington State wins out and wins the conference, wins the Pac-12. I think that leaves Washington State out of the running because they lost 2 games, but that boosts Boise State's schedule. If BYU also has a great rest of the season as well, I mean, they just took down, I believe, Michigan State, and they played Mississippi State. I might have gotten those backwards. I can't remember. But, they might end up with a decent season. And so I think that could push them into the top 6, but I don't think they'll ever make the top 4 this year. I mean,
I think I think the really easy short answer is no. And, I've felt like the college football playoff was essential. I didn't think it was created to leave these smaller conference schools out, but it's just not built for it. However, the one circumstance where it can occur is when chaos happens. Look, there could be a 2-loss Alabama team here within the next 3 weeks. Wisconsin could beat Ohio State but fail to win the Big Ten. Michigan could in turn lose to Ohio State. So we do have some scenarios where Boise State could move up. The only problem is that this committee doesn't really do things by default. In a default system, Boise State would move up. I think the committee would probably leave them out, but I would say, if chaos ensues, they would probably be sitting at number 5. They would probably be just that last team out. And I'm not sure that very many people could justify them being in the top 4 unless, as you mentioned, Washington State goes ahead and wins the Pac-12 and BYU continues to have positive results.
So if say Washington State wins the Pac-12, they have 2 losses. Say at least one of the other Power 5 conferences have 2 losses, their best team. I mean, is that room for an undefeated Boise State to make it in, or do they go and say, hey, look, we don't want to put a Group of 5 in because that destroys the whole idea of separating them into 2 divisions of 5. Let's put in another good Power 5 team that didn't win their conference. Let's put in Tennessee because they lost in the conference championship, but they made it to the conference championship in the SEC, so let's put them in with Alabama. I mean, I would be flustered if that happens. I think it would be completely unfair. I think with the Group of 5 automatic qualifier for the New Year's 6 bowl game, they have to be a conference champion. So in your guys' opinion, should the Final 4, the playoff teams, should they have to be a conference champion to be able to participate? And if not, then why can't a higher ranked Houston be in the New Year's 6 bowl over Boise State, even if Houston doesn't win their conference championship?
I don't think so. Let me take you back to 2006, the last game of the regular season. Jim Tressel was the head coach at Ohio State, and Lloyd Carr was the head coach at Michigan. Both teams were 11-0, number 1 versus number 2. This is probably the national championship game. And one of these teams didn't even make the BCS because they had to play this game beforehand. Now, I understand that, but I mean, in a playoff scenario, this probably would have been the championship game. I'll tell you the final score: Ohio State 42, Michigan 39. Now we know that Ohio State goes on to lose to Florida, I believe, in the championship, and that's why there should be a playoff, in my opinion. But I don't think you need to be a conference championship, because at that case, you might be leaving out the second best team in the country because they had to play the best team, maybe, as seen by the voters at that point in time.
But how do you justify putting in a team that, didn't win a conference championship when another conference did. Now, with the Big 12 not having a championship game, I could actually understand that one. Putting in the two top SEC teams or putting in Michigan and Ohio State, I could justify that since the Big 12 doesn't have a conference championship game. But 3 years from now when they will, or 2 years or whenever it is, I find it hard to justify putting in a team that didn't win their conference championship into a 4-team playoff where there's 5 conferences.
Well, let me just say the AP and the coaches poll for that year in 2006, before the bowl games were played, Ohio State was unanimous number 1 in both polls. Florida came in at number 2. Michigan came in at number 3, and LSU was number 4. 5 and 6 were flipped. 7 and 8 were flipped, and Boise State was number 9 with Auburn 10 and Notre Dame 11. It doesn't matter as we get down there. But, I mean, right here, if you were using this as what, maybe the experts, this is the coaches poll, this is the AP poll, if this is what the College Football Playoff Committee would have chosen, then no, you can't have to be a champion of your conference. Because Michigan 11-1 only loss was by 3 points against Ohio State on the road.
Well, and I get that, but the the college football playoff poll isn't constructed the same way as the AP. And so that's my only thought, is they see things differently than AP voters did. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're looking at it completely differently.
I get you. I just don't think you can automatically write off a team. I mean, this is supposed to be the best teams are playing for the championship, and maybe you're the 4th best team, or the 3rd best team, and you lost to the best team in a very close game. It's something that we have to be able to look at and evaluate. I don't think you can automatically write a team off for that.
Well, and the thing that I see though is when you're looking at the New Year's Six bowls, some of the high-ranked teams get left off because of the way that the affiliation of conferences goes. And I think that's unfair too. But I don't know. If they have that stipulation for group of 5, I don't see why they shouldn't have it for the playoffs as well.
Yeah, and look, I definitely believe, I think this year more than any other, I think it'll be pretty easy. I do think that the conference champions, all of them will end up being in the top 4, and the Big 12 will be left out. I just think that's how this year is going to go. But I do agree with what Ryan says. The only time that this really matters is just margin of victory. Look, we saw it with LSU and Alabama. To be honest, Alabama won that game head-to-head. So I didn't, or was it LSU? I can't recall, but I believe
think
it was
won
a
the
very
first
close
game, and then the rematch, I think Alabama won.
You're right. I think it was like all field goals or something. Yeah, I just remember it being an all field goals game and being freaking boring.
Yeah. I left after the 3rd quarter of that championship game.
But no, I definitely think, the reason why conference champions are important is it does put emphasis on the regular season. There's only one team that really comes to, and maybe I don't think I'm being biased. I think the ACC has generally been seen as weak, but gosh, I would love to see Louisville in the top 4 because I think they're super exciting. We're not going to have that happen because, to be honest, the other team that's basically, I think, a mirror image of Louisville is Washington. I actually think Washington shows similar speed, similar physicality on defense. So I think this year, actually, more than any other years, look, the playoff, yeah, it's supposed to, I mean, Ryan, you're right. It's supposed to be the 4 best teams in the country, but when you have people in the room who are representative of conferences and regions, they are really, really going to tout their conference champion. And, I just don't know if that will ever happen until maybe the playoff moves to maybe 6 or 8 teams. But I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
Unless we've got mass chaos.
Yeah, no, it needs to have mass chaos. But you're right. We need to expand. Kind of following that same question and thought. Houston. Are they done at this point? They've lost to Navy. They're going to need Navy to lose twice in the remaining 5 games because they are in the same division of their conference, and you have to be a conference champion to get in there. I mean, obviously, if Boise State wins out, I think Boise State undefeated probably gets in over Houston. But is there any chance for Houston?
No. In my opinion, I don't think they have a shot at getting in. And, yeah, I'm not going to say they don't have any shot, but, they really need some help as well. Boise State has continued to rise. And at the end of the day, I think there's a really solid chance that Boise goes undefeated as a conference champion. And even with Houston potentially beating Louisville, which I'm not sure is going to even happen at this point, and even if Houston ends up getting a conference championship with Navy losing twice, I still see Boise State in front of them.
It's really interesting because this Houston team would have to win out, even if, let's say, they beat Louisville. The Louisville win is less impressive now that Louisville has lost to Clemson. I'm not saying it's not impressive. It's just a little less impressive.
And the Oklahoma win is even less
conference
impressive
now. Let's say they lose to Louisville and they get to the conference championship. Now they're completely out of the mix because they've got 2 losses. They're not going to be above an undefeated Boise State, or maybe even if Boise State loses, an undefeated Western Michigan. I just think it's too hard for Houston to get there. Marcus, do you agree?
Yeah, I think they have to beat Louisville, and Navy has to lose 2 games, and it's very possible. But if Navy is going to be losing 2 conference games, what's to say Houston won't lose 1 more, which will put them even further, underneath Navy anyways. So I think Louisville, they might end up being ranked in the top 15, top 10 even by the end of the season, but I don't think they'll make it to their conference championship unless, all hell breaks loose like it could in the SEC, the Big Ten, ACC, and Pac-12. I mean, it could just be a complete bloodbath, and then who knows? And Boise State, they're on a roll this year. This is the first time since I think 2011 that they started 5-0. Heck, since they've started 2-0. And so, they had a very off season last year after, having a decent start. So they, fingers crossed, knock on wood, they could have a crazy season in the second half. And, that could, bump Houston back up or whatever. But, I think this year it could be a simple, hey, these 4 champions are undefeated, or hey, they all have 1 loss. That's an easy pick. Boise State's the highest ranked conference champion. They get into the Cotton Bowl. And it could be a super easy, super simple way of getting everything set for the postseason. But then again, it could just be utter chaos like Michael keeps saying, and we could have no idea.
And at this point, who knows if Houston will lose another game because of maybe a little bit of speculation of their coach possibly leaving for another job. I think that's a good way to transition us into some of these hot seats. I've got 3 teams that have got pretty warm seats right now. Marcus, which is your hottest seat right now of these 3, Texas, Oregon, and Notre Dame?
I want to say Texas, but that one's hard. I don't think you give Oregon the hot seat. They had an okay season last year. It wasn't, the Oregon of Marcus Mariota era, but it was pretty good last year. I think they're having an off year, and I think it's hard to say, hey, you had a decent year and then a bad year, so we're going to let you go. I think that's too hard. Notre Dame, they were pretty good last year, and they're having a rough year this year. Kind of the same situation. Do you let them go because they had 1 slip up? Yeah, I know Notre Dame wasn't super great, all the years before that. But with Texas, Charlie Strong's first year was last year. He was coming into a program that wasn't super strong, and, it was a bad year. Yeah, they took down Oklahoma, who made it to the playoffs, but it was still a bad year for them. This year they started off strong. Yeah, the teams they beat weren't necessarily super strong, but they started off stronger than they had the last few years. And so I think they give him the benefit of the doubt that he's still working, his way to a stronger program. And I think he has the hardest or the hottest seat of those three, but I think he should be fine. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame let their coach go.
Let me jump in here before we bring Michael into this. I'm just going to ask straight up, Marcus, real fast, and Michael, I want you to answer on this too. I think Oregon, as you said, he's not on a hot seat. I think his seat got hot when he blew a 31-0 halftime lead in their bowl game, and now they've lost 4 straight games. And if they lose to Cal this next weekend on the road, is he done? Is that it? 5 in a row, or is it? I mean, he's got Cal, Arizona State, USC, Stanford, Utah, Oregon State. Only 2 of those games are as you look on the schedule, are circle. This should be a win. There's 4 or 5, maybe even 5 games there that you go, this could be tough and we could lose. And seeing the way they've played the last 4 weeks, how many does he have to win to be safe?
I don't know if it's a factor of how many does he have to win. I think it's just if he can salvage the season with a decent.
If he goes 4-8, is he back next year?
Absolutely not.
If he goes 4-8, yeah, I think if he goes 4-8, that's hard pressed to keep him along. But if you look at the teams that they lost to, the 4 in the row, and they lost to Nebraska, who, what are they, 11, 10? Yeah. Colorado, who jumped into the top 25 at one point, not a bad team. Washington State, who's on the rise, and yeah, they lost to Eastern Washington and Boise State. Boise State's actually really good this year. Eastern Washington is a pretty solid FCS team. Still not an excuse, but Washington State has taken down some big names. And then Washington. Yeah, those last 2 games were pretty bad. 51-33 to Washington State, and then 70-21 against Washington. That's a horrendous score. But the last 4 losses were to really good or at least pretty good teams. And so I think, against Cal, another decent team, I think, they'll figure things out. Arizona State's all right. USC is always a hard game, so Stanford and Utah. I find it hard to believe that they'll lose more than 6 games, but, you never know with the Pac-12. So I think he'll be fine this year. I think you make a good point. 4-8, I think he's gone, but I think if he can be bowl eligible, they'll say, hey, you got 1 more year, good luck. And then
I think they'll be hard pressed for bowl eligibility. Michael, they scored they gave up 121 points the last 2 weeks and 162 in the last 3 weeks. Is he gone at the end of the year?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets fired in season. I actually think he has the hottest season, the hottest seat out of all 3 of those coaches. Look, Notre Dame, they're going to be patient. They went to a national title game under Brian Kelly. They're going to give him probably 1 more season. Look, the scapegoat for Notre Dame was the defensive coordinator. It's all on Brian Kelly now. And that game against NC State was super sloppy. I don't even know if that's a mulligan, but I think he's in trouble, but I don't think he'll get fired at the end of the year. Charlie Strong, it's just a matter of the boosters can hang on for 1 more season. But Helfrich, think about it. This is his 4th season. This is without Chip Kelly. This is with his recruits. When a team fires a coach in LSU, a lot of other big name programs, if they're struggling, will go ahead and fire their coaches because they're lining themselves up for Tom Herman. They're lining themselves up for the next big coaching job. And to be honest, Oregon has the best recruiting resources, in my opinion, out of almost anybody in the country, based off of their clothing, based off of their facilities. Sure, it's the Pacific Northwest, but you can have an empire there because you basically have a blank check from Phil Knight to outfit your players in whatever they want. I would be shocked if he wasn't fired in season, and I think they probably should fire him because it would give them more of an opportunity to land a big coach.
Yeah, let me just. This is the Oregon Duck team basically that played in a national championship game 2 seasons ago. And now they're struggling.
Yep.
They gave up 70 points last week, 51 the week before, and they're scoring between 20 and 30. This Oregon Duck defense has never been great, but if they can't score, and at least keep it in a relatively manageable range, I just don't see how they're going to win, 3 or 4 of their remaining games. Michael, is Notre Dame hot?
Oh yeah, it's certainly hot because it's Notre Dame, but for some reason, I think Brian Kelly has the support of the boosters and support of the Notre Dame community. I'd be really surprised if he got fired at the end of the season. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't know. I think the defense needs to get worked out, and arguably, if they only gave up 28 points or less, there's a really good chance that they're undefeated right now.
I don't have a question a lot in their offense. I mean, obviously last week was an anomaly because of the weather, but this Notre Dame team is 2-4, and they've got games left against Stanford, Miami, Navy, Army, Virginia Tech, and USC.
That's a tough slate.
How many of those games are really going to be winnable? I mean, Stanford hasn't looked good of late, but, I mean, it's Stanford. Who knows? Miami is a good team. Navy just took down Houston. Army has looked pretty good at times, but I think that'll be a winnable game. Virginia Tech looked good against North Carolina, and let me say, they kicked the crap out of North Carolina. And USC is always a tough game. What? And it's on the road. Where do you see them picking up a winning record?
I think you bring up an excellent point, and I don't think they will finish the season with a winning record.
Does he need a winning record, or does he get one more year?
I think he gets another year, but gosh, now that you put it that way, you really have to think about it. It doesn't seem like the Notre Dame fans are maybe as impatient as maybe the folks down in Austin, but you're right. I mean, he's going to have to make some significant changes to garner the faith of the alumni and the board of trustees.
And this is a Notre Dame team that played Alabama and got killed in the 2013 national championship game. So only a couple years before, Oregon was there. Michael, let me go to Marcus here. Marcus, let's just say all 3 of these coaches are fired. Give me your best candidate to replace at each place.
Well, first you look at Houston's head coach, try and steal him. Next, you look at Boise State's head coach, try and steal him. And then, I don't know if Les Miles is a good pick for any of those schools. Maybe Texas. But I think he wears that one championship ring with pride, and he hasn't done much other than that, and that was with Nick Saban's crew. So, I don't know if he's quite the coach that he has been touted to be, so I don't know if you go for that. I think you go for the young guys, try and build off of them. Brian Harsin, I think, would be a great fit over Oregon, as would Houston's head coach. But, Houston's head coach, he's in Texas, so maybe he'd be a good fit for Texas. And then, there's a bunch of other young coaches out there. At Notre Dame, you got, their offensive coordinator used to be at Boise State, Mike Sanford. Sanford, right? Yeah. Mike Sanford, was at Boise State, offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. Why not just bump him up? He's a good coach from what I've seen, and he's already there. So, there's young guys in the country already coaching who have proven themselves. Why not give it to them? This might be a little biased. I find it hard to see Brian Harsin leaving Boise. He's from Boise, played at Boise State, coached there forever. He's been a part of every single Fiesta Bowl that they've won. Unless the money is talking to him, I find it hard-pressed that he'll leave at least this soon in his career coaching there. But, go for the young guys. That's what I think. They got a different mentality. The Lakers just signed, Luke Walton as their head coach, young guy, successful guy. I think coaches, programs are looking at younger so that they can grow with it and have fresh ideas instead of old ones.
I think you bring up an interesting point with Harsin. Harsin left Boise for Texas. It was one of those schools that was on his list, and maybe since he's gone there, he won't go back. But he went as an offensive coordinator, and if he had the opportunity to go as a head coach, I think he might jump on that. He also might jump on the opportunity to go to the Pac-12 and go over to Oregon, where, as you said, blank check and some of the great stuff, and just have an amazing rivalry against Peterson at Washington. That could set up for some really interesting stuff there. Michael, where do you see, let's say, Tom Herman, Houston's coach, landing?
Yeah,
does he
this
stay
is
put, or does he go?
I actually think this is much trickier actually than what it looks like from the outside. Look, if Houston joins the Big 12, I think it'd be very difficult for Tom Herman to leave. But I think the best option for him, I mean, he's kind of a Texas guy. I think it makes the most sense for him to land at Texas. Now, you have to assume as well when you fire a head coach that those coaches are also available for your future gigs. So you got Charlie Strong and Brian Kelly who would potentially be available for other openings. I think it'd be interesting for either of those candidates to potentially land at LSU. I doubt they would, but Charlie Strong's an SEC guy. He was at Florida under Urban Meyer, so that might be an interesting prospect. Harsin, I think, is a very attractive candidate. I think Oregon probably makes the most sense for him, as you guys mentioned. He's already out on the West Coast. But I think another interesting job that will probably come available, I don't think USC's head coach makes it. I think they're going to end up firing him.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you if USC gets fired, who goes there? I have a candidate in mind, but who are you thinking?
I mean, I would love to see Coach O go back to USC and be their head coach, but he's just not. I don't think it's unfortunate because I think he deserves a shot. But he probably will not be hired on as a head coach. I think Chris Peterson at Washington, I think it's very enticing for him to potentially land, but he's just gotten things really good at Washington.
I don't see him leaving Washington.
And we know
that's what they said about Boise.
Yeah, well, the fans got a little restless in Boise.
He's just done a new facility. He's got his recruits under his belt now. They're winning. Yeah. He's paid a good amount, and they'll pay him more to make sure he stays. And it's also much of a family atmosphere of where they are still in the Pacific Northwest.
And Justin Wilcox, I believe he's at Wisconsin. I think he's an interesting name as well to keep in mind. Now he's a lot more defensive minded, but he's coached at USC before. I wouldn't be they're not going to hire Kiffin or Sark back there, but I think Justin Wilcox as well might be an interesting name. He would need to find somebody really strong on the offensive side of the ball for it to work, but he might be an interesting candidate as well for some open jobs.
One of those ones that maybe would become interesting is if he would leave Washington for Oregon, because they hired Helfrich instead, and Peterson did coach at Oregon, but I think he's found his place. He's happy with Washington, and he wants to bring Washington back to power, and he's kind of doing it already right now because they're number 5.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting.
As I look at USC, and I'm going to give you 2 names, and I know one of them is not the best of names right now, but he's one, and I think he might fit in that the light quite well of what USC is, but at the same time, because of how much attention it is, he might fail miserably, especially with what's happened. But what do you have to say about Art Briles at USC?
I think Art Briles at USC invites a natural disaster. I mean, you want to talk about place...
I would completely agree.
I mean, you want to talk about a place that can get any recruit in California and has all the money in the world. Look, he didn't even have those things at Baylor, and yet he was landing these guys with troubled past. And I'm not saying all the guys at USC have troubled past, but there have been a few incidents on their team. They're a very undisciplined football team at times. Would it be a really, really interesting hire? Absolutely. I don't know if the situation is as toxic as it looks from the outside, but he kind of does seem like one of those coaches who's willing to go all out and maybe cover up a few things in order to get some of the best talent. But I think it would be a great hire at first, but in the long term it might be pretty detrimental.
Looking at USC, I mean, we're talking about them as if they've fired their coach. I mean, they've got a new athletic director in former NFL standout Lynn Swann, who is a USC guy. Is his move, Marcus? Let me direct this question to you. They're 3-3 right now. If they finish around 600, 500, 6-6, or if they finish maybe around maybe 7-6, do you fire your coach? And if so, why? And what I'm really trying to get at is if you can land Les Miles behind the scenes beforehand, and then you fire your coach to pick up Les Miles, would you do it for USC?
That's a hard one because they've had, how many coaches have they had since they fired Lane Kiffin, including interim? Yeah, I think you just need someone that's decent enough that can, keep the program steady for a little bit until you can find a super solid coach. Les Miles isn't a super solid coach in my opinion. And so, if you keep throwing in different coaches, you're not going to ever really get any, basis, any traction if you keep jumping, back and forth between coaches. So I think, if they come off with a winning season, keep their coach, give him another shot, see what he can do. And then maybe in a year or two, a solid coach is going to be available. Someone who didn't just get fired from an SEC job. I mean, yeah, it's enticing to pick up an SEC coach, but if he just got fired, that means he wasn't doing his job. Why do you want to fire your coach who's not doing horrible to bring in a guy who just lost his job? So I think to keep some, solid ground there, you keep this guy. I can't even remember their coach's name, but you keep him around. Yes, thank you. Keep him around, let him get a base, and, in a couple of years, a better coach might be available, and when his contract's up, get rid of him. But then again, next year, or even this year, if they don't have if they go 4-8 or whatever, and maybe keep him, test him out a little bit, but, starts off next year sub 50 in the first 6 games, yeah, get rid of him. Obviously, you don't keep him around if he's not doing his job, but I think you got to keep him around long enough to at least attempt to get a strong base.
Well, I think Charlie Strong would be a fantastic fit out there. If he was available, you want somebody opposite. He's going to clean up the program. I think he'd be great. It would depend on how patient the USC fans could be, but I think Charlie Strong would be an interesting hire out there.
A question of a guy that I want to ask you guys if he maybe could find one of these jobs, maybe Oregon, because I think he might be able to fit in at Oregon. He's definitely a little bit of a quieter name. I hope when I say his name you both know him of where he coaches, but if you don't, please speak up because it would be interesting that for me. And maybe he doesn't go to one of these jobs, but maybe he'll take up Purdue's job, or does he stay put? And Purdue might go to somebody, as you said, Mike Sanford, but PJ Fleck.
Where does PJ Fleck coach, Ryan? I'm going to be the...
See, that's what I was waiting for. He's at Western Michigan. He went 1-11 his first year.
I saw a
8-5
little...
his last 2 years and 6-0. He's 6-0 now. So he's 23-21 in his 4 years to date, but that's all based on 11 losses his first year and changing the program. But 8-5, 8-5, and they're 6-0 to this point. Is PJ Fleck a guy that leaves for maybe Oregon, who kind of runs that score, a little bit quicker pace, score points, and or does he maybe go to one of those smaller Big Ten universities that's in the area of where he already is?
I think you made a good point that, he doesn't necessarily have the recognition or the record to go to an elite school like Oregon or Texas or Notre Dame. But you make a good point with Purdue or, some of those other small schools. Rutgers is struggling right now. Do they get rid of their coach? Do you put him in there? I think that's a good point. A less dominant Power 5 program, I think, would absolutely pick up a coach like him. We saw
that with Matt Campbell leaving from Toledo to go to Iowa State.
Yeah, exactly. So, why not, pick up a guy from a slightly smaller school when you're, a theoretically weaker Power 5 team? Washington wasn't doing super great, and they picked up Chris Peterson from Boise State. Yeah, Boise State's more well known and bigger than Western Michigan. And then Chris Peterson, had a much better record, but smaller, less dominant Power 5 schools pick up dominant smaller school coaches all the time. Look at North Dakota State's head coach getting picked up by, I believe, Colorado State, because he was so dominant at a lower level. He got recognized and got picked up. Didn't get picked up by a huge school, but someone with, a little bit of street cred, and then, he can work his way up. So, I think it would be a solid pick for one of those schools that might be getting rid of the coach, trying to rebuild still. I think it would be a good pick. I don't see why not.
I think a good fit for him to land would be if Tom Herman left Houston. I don't know how well he would do on just I feel like the Oregon job is a giant step up. You're right. It is, Eugene. It's going to be a little bit smaller town feel, but the expectations are going to be high. Houston has proven to be a training ground for a number of top head coaches: Kevin Sumlin, Art Briles, Tom Herman. There's a number of coaches that go through there. I think he'd be a fantastic fit for them in the chance that Tom Herman left.
So, I think it's wrapping up our show, guys. Unless you guys have any more questions you guys want to kind of throw around this round table. I think this has been a good week. We're just kind of breaking the mold a little bit, talking more about some of the issues and what we think about what's happened so far. If you guys are still looking for our game picks, we're going to post those. Each of us will pick the game. We'll have that in an article with a little, why to watch the game, what's important about it. And then you can go check those out. And that'll be posted on our Facebook, as well as the article will be on the website. And it should just be a little bit quicker of a way for you to go see what our take is, instead of a 30, 40-minute, audio of the week games and stuff. So come back next week. We'll do the same kind of format where we bring a couple questions in and we talk about it and each get a say and some different ideas and takes on it. Marcus, Michael, thanks for joining us this week. We look forward to a great weekend as well as next week's show.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.